You're listening to Southern Fried Sports with Travis Reier on Tide 100.9 in Tuscaloosa.
At Grand Canyon University, we believe in equal opportunity, and the American dream starts with purpose. Whether your pursuit involves a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, GCU's learning environments are designed for supportive networking and collaboration. With over 330 academic programs, GCU provides a path to help you fulfill your dreams. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Find your purpose at GCU. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
This is Southern Fried Sports with Bama Online senior analyst Travis Reier on your home for Alabama sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
If I make it through this year, I think I'm gonna put this bottle down. I guess as time goes on, I'll grow to miss it less than I will now. And I think I'm gonna tell her that I'm gonna go away for a while, till I can get this demon out.
It is 11 a.m. on a overcast kind of day here in Tuscaloosa. Tuesday edition of Southern Fried Sports here on Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports. My name is Jacob Harrison, filling in for the one and only Travis Reier. Show is always brought to you by Peterbrook Chocolates here, 1530 McFarland Boulevard. Just south of Northport, just north of Tuscaloosa, right kind of there in the middle, and they've still got the chocolate popcorn ready for you. Stop in from 10 to 8 p.m., or excuse me, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. today. Pick yourself up a bag of chocolate-covered popcorn. I mean, salt, butter, and chocolate. What else you need in life? Nothing. That's all you need. Give them a call ahead, 205-752-0211 if you need to do so. And, of course, you can always call us via the Peterbrook Chocolatier hotline, 205-342-9904. We'll take your phone calls in the first and last segments today. We'll have Joey Blackwell of Bama Central on today at 10:15. We'll pick his brain about the ruling that was handed down to the NCAA yesterday, and not only what the ruling in that case, the Alston versus NCAA case, what that means for college sports, but also, obviously, what the justices, especially Brett Kavanaugh, what was written in the dissertation, what it means for name, image, and likeness, and what's going on with that moving forward, as well as the meetings that are going on today and tomorrow from the big wigs, the suits of the NCAA today in Dallas, and what that means for playoff expansion, NIL. We're in the thrust of a quick and obvious evolution. This is what they call macro evolution in Biology 101 when you first get to college. This is macro. This is in your face, happening live right now. We're living in the evolution of college football. Before we get into any of that, I am not alone today. As I fill in for Travis, someone has to fill in for me. And today, that man is the Iron Man, Joe Gaither. And today, we will form the 60-Minute Men. Woo! What's going on, Joe, man?
Oh, another day in paradise. Happy to have a Tuesday. It's always fun to sit in on Southern Fried Sports.
It's always a blast. Always a blast. So, we've been hanging out, but we haven't really been talking a lot about all of this, kind of conserving talk just a little bit. Of course, I had instant reactions yesterday. And most of what I saw was Kavanaugh, so I didn't know at the time, because I went from producing Gary's show to immediately jumping in here, exactly what was going on in that case and how it pertained to the educational standards of things. But Gary said it really well at the end of his show just a second ago. This is common sense stuff. And like I responded to him, the NCAA doesn't deal in common sense. One of the best things written yesterday Kavanaugh hit the NCAA with two easy sentences. First, the NCAA is not above the law. But second, the NCAA's business model would be flatly illegal in almost every other business in America. And all of that was on the back end. Like, he just wanted to tack that on and be like, you're already screwing up in this department, but by the way, college football starts for, at least for the Alabama Crimson Tide, in 74 days. You need to get your stuff together while you're in Dallas over the next 2 days. Figure out this playoff expansion. That's all well and good. But your business structure may very well be illegal, may very well be against antitrust laws. There's a lot of issues going on right there with the NCAA. And, you know, even, of course I'm excited because I've been screaming since I've gotten the chance on a microphone to say anything about the lack of structure with the NCAA. But it's so incredible that for all this time, the NCAA has operated on a preferential basis of this is what our fans prefer, this is the way we prefer to operate, and despite it going against the norms of everything in our capitalistic society, we're going to play by our own rules, and no one's going to say otherwise. And now all of a sudden, as soon as these things start to get just a tad bit more and more speed, they find themselves in courtrooms with no defense because their defense has always been just amateurism with no substance behind it. Because they speak on fairness all the time, but yet they lack the ability to govern what they have created. The NCAA should exist. I wholeheartedly would agree with what Gary said at the end of his show. You can't have, I mean, you probably can, honestly, but you'd be in a very difficult situation if you had college sports without the NCAA. I'm not blind to that fact. But at the end of the day, what you can't have is a governing body that can't control its subjects. And at the end of the day, when college members routinely are circumventing the rules, are bypassing rules, you're going to have that when you have 1,100 members. No one's complaining about that fact. But the NCAA lacks the ability to properly govern, discipline, and enforce any of its properties, especially when the basis for all of its arguments, the basis for what structure it claims to have is amateurism, yet the NCAA's suits, the NCAA's partners, whether it's TV endorsements or otherwise, are raking in millions and millions of dollars off the backs of the athletes, regardless of sport, that are performing on live television, usually nationally, and providing entertainment and joy to millions of fans across the country. I mean, it's common sense, just like Gary said. Let's jump out to the Peterbrook Chocolatier hotline. Welcome Jeremy from Florida into the show. What's going on, Jeremy?
Hey, good afternoon. Well, it's afternoon for me. Good morning to you.
Yeah.
Hey, I had a question about the name, image, and likeness and the consequences that it may have that we ain't really thought about. One was Alabama football. You know, Nick Saban doesn't let freshmen speak. You think that may go away because it's going to hinder them of having, boosting their profiles on the social media aspect, and that wouldn't be fair to them. And also, SEC meeting days coming up. When you bring in three players, you're selecting three players that are going to get their profile boosted in that way as well. There could be some, people upset on the team that they didn't get chosen. Just the thoughts on that, because I've not heard anyone speak on that.
Well, I'll tell you this. First of all, I think that at the end of the day, schools are still going to be fully within their right to have their own rules. I mean, think about it. Even with the state of Alabama having its own NIL rules that are going to be put in place in about a week and a half on July 1st, then Alabama still has what they have going on with what they want to structure to be able to allow their college athletes to benefit from with the advantage, right? So they're teaching their students in the same manner, but there's still nothing really saying from the legislation that, Nick Saban has to relinquish any sort of power to, freshman football players just because they get an endorsement. And I think those freshman players will still get endorsements, and most of the time it's probably going to be through some sort of social media. And in those situations, it's going to be, I'm Kool-Aid McKinstry, try the new Kool-Aid flavor. It's not going to be about football, and therefore it kind of helps circumvent that a little bit. Okay.
Well, other than it could hurt, which I don't think it will, but it could hurt Nick Saban in recruiting. Once people say, well, as a freshman, you can, we'll give you the microphone or the camera, so you can have your name out there more prominently. But then again, it's not forced. You can't force Nick Saban to change. But I think if he sees it, he would. I think he would change that if he thought it would hurt him.
Well, exactly. I mean, I say it all the time, is everything that Nick Saban does is for recruiting. And it almost seems like over the past few years, he's gotten even better at recruiting. And now he's, this is a challenge in front of him, no doubt, because of the evolution of college football. But at the end of the day, who's better at overcoming these challenges? There were plenty of people this time last year that were saying COVID is going to ruin Nick Saban. He's not going to be able to recruit, and he turned out one of the best classes he ever signed.
He's a visionary, without a doubt. That's what makes him great at recruiting and changing his whole program, because he can see. He has a great gift of seeing what's coming and how to adjust to it properly. He's proactive where most people are reactive naturally. That's just how most people are. But he's very talented at being proactive. So it was just I drive trucks here in the Keys of Florida, and something I came across on mine, and I figured I'd call in and ask you about it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Yeah, have a great day.
You too. Take it easy. That was Jeremy down in Florida raising a good question. Look, there are a lot of things, though, that when it comes to the NIL, where we're not going to know until it kind of happens. We could have NIL rules drop by the end of the week from the NCAA that kind of solidify what we're dealing with. Or we could have a situation where everything gets put on hold. Just the 7 states that are going to have rules on July 1st will have rules until the NCAA is able to figure something out, or until the NCAA is able to convene with Congress to figure something out. There's so much up in the air that is unknown right now. And on the same side of that, you've got NCAA leadership telling Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated, holy crap, why didn't we act on this in January? Because keep that in mind, all of this was supposed to be voted on in January. All of this was supposed to have already been handled. And it wasn't. It was completely screwed from the beginning. And he says it himself. One NCAA decision maker tells Ross Dellinger, we've done it to ourselves. Everyone has their own agenda. If we come out of this, talking about the meetings today and tomorrow in Dallas without doing anything, we are dysfunctional. And Congress has been questioning the leadership in the NCAA for months now, as has the Supreme Court. So at the end of the day, what are the NCAA's capabilities to really come up with something that is fair, that works, and doesn't break antitrust laws before the fall season? Not just football, but the fall season. And keep in mind, they had something that they pretty much agreed on in January, and now there's about 9 commissioners of conferences, 6 conference commissioners, 3 from the Power 5, are encouraging a new NIL proposal. And under that plan, the NCAA would exempt itself from NIL completely. And schools and states with an NIL law may follow that law without penalty, and schools located in states without a statute are granted permission to each create and administer their own NIL policy as long as they use 2 guiding principles: no pay for play or recruiting inducements. Are you kidding? It's just like the NCAA to just try to pass the buck instead of solving their own problems. Mark Emmert said if we don't come up with something by July, he'll put something temporary in place. But he's got Can I count? He's got 6 conference commissioners that he's got to persuade to go back to the deal that they had already halfway agreed on but never voted on. They just tabled the discussion. What a dysfunctional group is the NCAA. Broken from the beginning. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll welcome Joey Blackwell of Bama Central into the show. We'll get his thoughts on all of these situations and more. Joey Blackwell next on Southern Fried Sports, on your home for Alabama sports, Tide 100.9.
Touchdown! Alabama wins! The Alabama football countdown clock is driven by Crawford Insurance, Tuscaloosa's low-cost auto insurer. Call 752-6489 for a free quote today.
Roll Tide! Roll Tide!
There are 74 days until Alabama football.
I see.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
Drier air is moving into the area this afternoon. Skies will be steadily clearing with partly cloudy skies overnight tonight. 80 your daytime high this afternoon. 62 overnight tonight. Partly cloudy and warm for your Wednesday. Look for a daytime high in the middle 80s. I'm meteorologist Bill Murray on Tide 100.9.
It's 73 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
Tide 100.9. For more coverage of Alabama football, visit us at Tide100.9.com or download the free Tide 100.9 app.
The Crimson Tide will not be denied.
How about this? Right at the top of the hour, Buccaneers wide receiver Antonio Brown, his probation was terminated a year early, and his criminal matter related to his battery case was finalized. Brown's lawyer, Sean Burstein, says we're very pleased to advise that his withheld adjudication is now final and has completed his probation a full year ahead of schedule. We see nothing but blue sky for AB. Well, they are in Florida, first of all. No, good for Antonio Brown, man. Good for him. Like, listen, I know his divorce from the Pittsburgh Steelers was horrendous, but he's still a human being, you know, and has the right to correct his wrongs and figure things out. And, you know, as Joey Blackwell will know, Joe Gaither will still try to get a second-round pick for Antonio Brown in our Dynasty Fantasy League. Will he
worth it?
Absolutely. He's always
definitely be worth it this year.
Joe the Schemer Gaither, as they call him.
Hey, he pulled off one of the best trades in league history last year. I mean, you got to give him credit. No doubt. Joey, man, welcome into the show. How you doing, dude?
Doing all right, my man. How are you doing, Jacob?
I'm doing good. The NCAA has been crushed under the thumb of bureaucracy, so I am a happy man.
Long time coming. It's good to see. You know, it's kind of funny if you had asked college athletes and people across the country that were NCAA fans if they were fans of Brett Kavanaugh or Neil Gorsuch, you've probably gotten a wide variety of responses. But after yesterday, you know, scathing at the hands of Kavanaugh, I think we're all Brett Kavanaugh fans when we woke up this morning.
Well, as long as it pertains to sports, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, let's narrow that for a second. Yeah, as long as it pertains to college athletics, absolutely.
So many listeners just flipped off the radio. Great idea, Jacob. No, all jokes aside, regardless, the case yesterday didn't actually have anything to do with NIL. Just Kavanaugh brought it up in his dissertation. Well written, you know, nonetheless. But as it pertains to Alston versus NCAA. Gary and I were talking about it at the end of his show. This is just common sense. Like, if a player needs extra tutoring, if a player needs a laptop, if players need anything to further help their ability to get a quality education at a university, then him being an athlete, her being an athlete, should not deter that player from getting those necessities. And finally, the NCAA has been told by the government, hey, this is common sense. Handle it.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And, you know, one of the big things from this, you know, of course, the only thing that's changing right now is, you know, with the Supreme Court upholding a decision by a district court to, you know, hopefully that will allow students to be able to get that extra, educational funding. But on top of that, it really sets a precedent, and that's what we get from Kavanaugh's write-up. His concurring opinion was that should the NCAA have to go to the Supreme Court again, Kavanaugh really set the grounds for, talking about how, one of the terms he used was, he said that the NCAA model, the current model, is suppressing the pay of student athletes who, collectively generate billions of dollars in revenues for colleges every year. And talking about how, should NIL come to the Supreme Court if that were to happen, or should pay for play and stuff like that come up, he really set a precedent. Now, of course, that precedent is not an official precedent because there wasn't a ruling attached to it. But at the same time, it really shows with the 9-0 vote where this court stands regarding players being paid for all the revenue they generate. And it was quite a bit, quite a shock to see such, an astounding, foot being put down on this issue, and it really sets up something for the future for college athletes everywhere.
It's really bizarre, though, when you really think about it, especially with the way the landscape of our politics here in this country has been very, very divided for a long time now. But, like we were joking about the Brett Kavanaugh situation, like that was a very divisive issue, just him being appointed a judge. But, this time, around, it's a 9-0 vote. It's clear as day that the NCAA is in the wrong here. And in his dissertation saying that the NCAA's business model would be flat out illegal in most businesses in this country. And you get the impression based off of the 9-0 vote today that a lot of this is just based solely on common sense. And, of course, Republicans and Democrats are going to have their own ways of tackling NIL should this find its way into Congress. And the NCAA hasn't really made up its mind on how it wants to handle that. But it's impressive nonetheless that we've gotten to this point where we can just agree that the NCAA's structure for all this time has been broken and is not really catered to supporting its athletes more or less just, almost holding them hostage with the way that they have operated.
And that was one of the best points. I read Kavanaugh's full dissertation, his concurring opinion this morning, and one of the best points I thought really hit home goes along with what you just said. You talked about how the NCAA couches its arguments for not paying student athletes using innocuous labels, and those labels, however, can't disguise reality. And he compared, talking about how cooks' wages, can't be lowered in a region because, quote unquote, customers prefer to eat food by low-paid cooks. He talks about law firms and how nurses' income can't be reduced to create a pure form of helping sick, and he even gave a little shout-out to journalists like you and myself. He said news organizations can't join forces to curtail pay to reporters to preserve a quote-unquote tradition of public-minded journalism. And I thought those points really hit home when you take a step back and examine how the NCAA has profited from these athletes who get no form of compensation as far as money goes, and even have educational benefits, limited by amount because of these rules that the NCAA has put in place. And I thought that really spoke to me, that paragraph. I encourage everybody that hasn't read it to go read it because it is a tongue lashing from Kavanaugh. But that was one point that really drove it home to me and what kind of set the precedent moving forward.
No doubt. But the interesting part, and I wasn't able to get with you and make sure that you had seen this, but Ross Dellinger, one of your colleagues there at Sports Illustrated, kind of laid out the law of the land here with the NIL, and basically got some information as far as to the fact that in January this was supposed to be handled, and it was tabled. They tried to handle some other stuff, and the NCAA has just been kicking the can down the road, and you almost start to feel a little bit bad for Mark Emmert, because he's the guy taking all the punches, and he's been saying for a little while now, if they don't figure something out, then we're going to put temporary plans in place in order to circumvent this. But at the beginning, this was about, the schools won't be in charge of paying the athletes. This will be under the NCAA's umbrella. We'll find a way to police it. We'll find a way to control it. And, even as uncomforting as that sounds, it's at least a plan that should work and makes most people happy, whether they're for or against NIL. But today, Dellinger talks about how 6 conference commissioners 3 from the Power 5, including the SEC's Greg Sankey, are in favor of a new proposal which would exempt the NCAA from the NIL completely. Schools and states with NIL law may follow that law, such as Alabama. Schools located in states without a statute can create and administer their own NIL policy, which is terrifying, as long as they follow 2 guidelines: no pay for play and no recruiting inducements. I don't know if you had seen that, but regardless, now hearing it, I mean, you got to laugh at the NCAA a little bit for continuing to kick the can down the road and absolve themselves from any sort of responsibility. But, I mean, of the 2, clearly the initial is a far better look for the NCAA, no?
Yeah, I agree. I hadn't seen that piece by Dellinger, but at the same time, it takes me back to what, SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey released a statement yesterday, and that kind of goes along with what Dellinger was saying. And in that statement, I'll read word for word what he said right here. He said, "What also is clear is the need for the continuing evaluation of the college model consistent with the court's decision and message." And then he goes on to talk about how the next step is to engage with the member institutions to consider the implications of the opinion that was delivered by the court yesterday, and, to continue to give the best educational funding and competitive opportunities to its student athletes. And sorry, I kind of lost where I was going with this, but the NCAA is supposed to have an NIL vote today, but you're absolutely right when you say them kicking the can down the road, because these laws go into effect this on July 1st for I think it's 8 states, including Alabama, and it's almost too little, too late for the NCAA. Now, that being said, I'm in favor of NIL. I think it's good for the student athletes. I think it's good for the sport. However, I do believe that there should be some overarching caps in order to limit first off, to promote competition, but to also limit that competition, because obviously if you're a recruit, and I've said this on your show many times, if you're a recruit and you're looking at going to a place like Alabama, where you have something set up like the Crimson Standard, and you have those millions and millions of dollars of revenue that are coming in that you can capitalize on putting your face and your brand out there. We've seen Will Anderson do something like that recently. He hasn't signed anything, but he's been building up his personal brand on social media, no doubt, in preparations for NIL effect. If you're a recruit that's seeing that, and then you're also being recruited by a lesser program, like let's just hypothetically say Tulane University. That's just the first one that came to my head. A university that has a solid football program, but doesn't have the same amount of revenue coming in, doesn't have the same, means to promote your image and to get you those contracts. You're obviously going to go to Alabama. And I think that there should be a cap on how much these players can earn, not because I want to limit their pay, but because I feel like that if there isn't a cap and this goes unregulated, you're going to have a lot of problems that create a very unequal opportunities as far as recruiting is concerned for these universities, and that could develop into a major problem.
Talking to Joey Blackwell of Bama Central at Blackwell Sports on the Twitter account, and as it pertains to what Alabama's law is, for those that don't know, it's actually a pretty basic law that kind of covers everything that you want out of an NIL situation, and it's almost kind of the bare bones of, like, this is what the NCAA would have to do. It's very, very simple. You can't be sponsored by anything with any unsavory tone, such as tobacco, alcohol, the goods, and requires disclosure of it. You can't use it for recruiting tactics. You can't use the registered license marks and logos, yada yada yada. It's all the basic stuff. So at the very least here in Alabama, and it also requires colleges and universities to do financial literacy, life skills, that sort of thing. So the advantage was already ahead of that. They had a guy from Florida who's a financial advisor come in and talk to the team last week. At the very least, here in Alabama, here in Tuscaloosa, we've got nothing to worry about for the Crimson Tide over this time. It's just, how's the rest of the NCAA going to be able to handle this, and are they going to be able to stand up to Alabama over the next 3 years because of the effect that these next 4 weeks could have on college football's future?
No, absolutely, and I think I said the Crimson Standard earlier. I meant the advantage. And you're absolutely right. I'm not worried about Alabama. Alabama has absolutely zero to worry about. Alabama fans should be very happy with these rules. If anything, it gives Alabama an advantage over other schools, which, of course, I'm sure Crimson Tide fans will be happy to hear. But I am worried, I am worried about smaller schools, not necessarily in SEC. I think everybody across the SEC will be fine. But smaller schools that aren't Power 5, that do have a difficulty already enough recruiting against top teams like Alabama and Ohio State and programs like that. At the same time, I think that, once again, I'll go back to what I just said. I think that if we maintain the competitive nature of the sport and not give the Power 5 conferences, more of a stranglehold on the sport than they already do, I think that setting up caps, and that could come from the NCAA, it could also come from a federal ruling, should this become, NIL become a federal law rather than an NCAA law. But I think that there is still work to be done, but that being said, we are a lot further than we were last year, and I really like the direction this is all headed.
Absolutely, no doubt. I mean, I'm excited. I've been screaming for NIL. I've been screaming for the transfer portal. I've been screaming for college football playoff expansion, and I don't know if this justifies that I was right or not, but I'm at least getting my way, and I'm going to pat my own back about it.
You're just ahead of the curve, Jacob. You're always ahead of the curve.
Yeah, you got to be. I mean, Nick Saban's ahead of the curve in recruiting. Look at him. Nonetheless, though, speaking of expansion, the next today and tomorrow, the big suits from the NCAA are in Dallas discussing not just NIL, but also the expansion. I know we were able to touch on this a little bit kind of right after that news broke on my show, Off the Edge, a week or so ago. But as it pertains to the discussions that can take place today, is there anything out of what you heard from the conference call before leading into today that can signify any sort of changes to the proposal that we've all become familiar with?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that came up in that conference call that was a question that several journalists had was, for the committee, was talking about how, I think the journalists represented the fans pretty well, because one of the things that I've seen online as the repercussions from the announcement was, good, we like 12 teams, we like where this is going, but there wanted to be more home matchups and games played on college campuses rather than in neutral sites. I could see the committee maybe amending that. That was one of the biggest things. I could see maybe the second round also being played in home stadiums of the top 4 seeds, because if you are in the top 4, you never get to play in your stadium. You immediately have a week off and then you play at a neutral site. So I could see that being something that could be tweaked. That aside from everything else, I also agree with that. But aside from everything else, I think that everything else is pretty much set in stone as far as what we'll see. Now, that being said, I'm sure there's some logistical issues we're surrounding that they'll have to address, and that might be why they only had that first round being played on college campuses rather than in NFL stadiums or other neutral sites. But I think that's something that we could see amended. I do lean towards it not being amended, but out of the questions that were said on that conference call, that would be one of the key things that sticks out to me that we might see changed moving forward.
Before we let you go, Joey, there was some pretty good news for the Alabama baseball team earlier today. I think last night actually is when it was kind of revealed a little bit. But Tyler Ross was selected as a finalist for the 2021 Rawlings NCAA Division I Gold Glove team. Talk about Ross and what he brings to the team, especially after Connor Prelip's departure from the team, and where Brad Bohannon's squad is shaping up for next year.
Well, Tyler Ross did an outstanding job this year, stepping up and being the primary Friday starter in Prelip's absence. People forget, he earned SEC All. He was named the SEC All Defensive Team this year at pitcher, which is of course decided by the league coaches. He was perfect in fielding. He had 1,000 in fielding. He had 7 putouts and 11 assists. He had a solid season overall. He finished 7-5. He tossed over 5 innings in 11 starts, and he had over 86 innings as a junior. And he's had a really solid year. Now, it might not be the year he wanted. It might not be the year a lot of people wanted for him, but he still had to step up in this very limited starting rotation from Alabama this year, with both Prelip and John being out for the majority of the season. I think it's shaping up for him to have a fantastic year. I think it also depends on how well Prelip can recover from his Tommy John surgery that he had a couple of weeks ago, and if he'll be, fully back by next spring, because we all know that Tommy John surgery is something that takes a long time to recover from. And you'd hate to see somebody like Prelip, have to hang up the cleats a little, too early, especially with his skills. But overall, I think Bohannon's doing a great job. I think Ross is doing a solid job. I think they'll be back next year with a better pitching rotation, especially with some of the commits that they have, or recruits that they have coming in. I do believe this Alabama team, despite how the season ended, they did. I think when you consider the injuries, I think they did outperform what they had on the field, and I see that next year. I see this team being better next year, barring injuries, of course, and really excited to see what Coach Bo has in store for next year.
No doubt. That's Joey Blackwell at Blackwell Sports on the Twitter account, writer, reporter for Sports Illustrated, Bama Central. Joey, man, I always appreciate it. It was a lot of fun to chat it up with you with the lights still on outside.
Jacob, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's really weird looking outside and seeing the sun for one. But yeah, you keep being you and keep staying ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. You too, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, man. Thanks.
Absolutely. Joey Blackwell of Bama Central joining us there. If you missed any part of that discussion, we got real in-depth on the NIL situation with the NCAA. You can always check it out on the Podcast Center under Southern Fried Sports. Denon has been hanging on very patiently on the Peterbrook Chocolatier Hotline. We'll get to him next, right after this, on Southern Fried Sports on Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.
You're listening to Southern Fried Sports with BamaOnline.com senior analyst Travis Reier on your home for Alabama sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
We're back for more here on Southern Fried Sports. I'm Jacob Harrison, filling in for the one and only Travis Reier. We'll be in for him for the rest of the week. He'll be back next week, so don't fret for the senior writer for Bama Online. He'll be back next week. Let's jump out to the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio hotline and welcome in Denon to the show. What's going on, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. What's on your mind?
I've been work day shift and catching stuff here and there on this NIL situation and everything. Kind of wondering, overall, how in the end, will this eventually affect the general everyday fan? Will ticket sale? I mean, we've already seen with the COVID situation and the stadium revitalization out at Bryant-Denny. Talking to a few of the people who have season tickets, the season tickets are wide open. There's a lot of folks have canceled because of that situation. Prices went up a lot on that. Will the price of these situations be forwarded to the fans one day?
You know, that's difficult because of the unknowns behind everything. Like I told Joey and said before we talked to him too, is, you know, we could have an understanding of what exactly our NIL situation is going to be in college football 2 days from now. It could be 2 weeks from now. But what we do know here in Alabama is that it's at least set in stone for what's going to happen on July 1st for us. I would say that I would think that it would that you know, still recovering, you know, not saying like we're still in the midst of this or anything, but just the schools trying to recoup from last year with COVID. I feel like that would have more of an impact on prices than name, image, and likeness. I will say, you know, once you put a player on that ticket now, it's wide up in the air as to whether or not that player is going to get paid for being on the ticket because he's in uniform and because it's distributed by the university. So my first instinct thinks, you know, based off of the wordings of many of the rules, that they won't profit from that. And therefore, a lot of those types of things, players being displayed, you know, under the bleachers, you know, down the halls or whatever, or on the jumbotrons, on the tickets, whatever, all that would seem to circumvent the NIL rules because all of their profits are supposed to come from third party.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's a lot of that situation there. I know a lot of the situation with the ticket wise. I think a lot of it has to do with people that actually said, "Hey, you know, I can stay at home." But then again, ticket wise, they've gone more the digital tickets these days anyway to keep a lot of the extra people making money off the tickets. But I did see another thing, another aspect of this situation. I just flipping through Twitter a minute ago. I can't remember exactly. I know Mac Herford, he's the one that retweeted the situation about NFL agents are already clamoring, getting their foot in the door with these players, possibly saying, "Hey, we'll give you a $500,000 upfront for your." I don't know. I guess maybe to incentivize. I guess it does open up a can of worms in a lot of situations. With NFL agents trying to. Yeah, that's the scary part of the whole deal there. The NFL agent saying, "Hey, you're going to capitalize on this. Let me help you capitalize." Even but we know how it is with agents. A lot of them are not on campus, but they have a lot of people on campus that reach out to the student athletes that's there with them. A lot of secondhand speech going on with these players. So it will be a can of worms. I'm glad I'm not one to have to. Police this thing, I guess, in a way of saying it. Not really police it, but it'll be a lot of. Let's be honest. A lot of these guys, it's going to be hard to turn down some amount of money. If an NFL agent gets involved, we know how slimy they can be anyway.
Bro, if somebody comes to my door and offers me $500,000, I am absolutely not turning that down.
I'm all in. But then again, you got to turn around and he's going to say, "Hey, you got to give me that back plus 10% later on."
Well, if you're a 5-star freshman at Alabama, odds are you're going to be able to turn that around and have absolutely no problem doing that. But then there's the problem.
Chances are you're going to pay it back pretty easily.
But what if you tear your knee in half? You never play football again, or Lord forbid, you pass away. Now your family's got to foot that $500,000 bill. I hate that, though. I absolutely hate that. And a lot of that just think about it. It comes down from the NCAA. If the NCAA isn't the governing body policing this, or the government as a whole, which, give them one more responsibility. That sounds like a great idea. If the NCAA is not governing this, and which is what 6 conference commissioners, including Greg Sankey, want to do, and just let it kind of be free reign, like, how do you stop an agent from offering a player? How do you stop any agent from offering Will Anderson any amount of money right now to be his agent later down the road? Because Will Anderson, as long as he stays healthy, is a top 5 pick in next year's NFL draft. Not this upcoming, but the following year. So how do you stop that? You can't. There's no way to stop that.
No, and we know how they are. God bless them. I don't mean to point out anybody. Talk badly about anybody, but NFL is a whole different thing. And I think overall, this might not be the most popular statement to make at the moment, but I think the hardened college football fan has a fear of college football turning into the NFL that we have kind of grown less of a fan of. I do watch a lot of the NFL from time to time, but I find myself these days, watching a game to see how the Bama guys do. I don't really follow a team like I used to, but it's more or less, now that we're putting more guys in the NFL, I want to see how those guys do.
Right.
But I think the average college football fan, their fear is, we don't really want college to turn into the NFL, which this may not have any effect at all on it. But it seems to be a shade of that coming, maybe.
Well, while I understand that from the transfer portal side and also from the side of the players being compensated, me, like, I agree with what Brett Kavanaugh kind of said in his dissertation, or at least alluded to. Like, what even is amateurism at this point when it's a $1 billion industry? Everybody's profiting except for the folks on the field. Regardless of sport, somebody's making money, and it ain't the players. Now, they get their benefits. They certainly have benefits that they earned that are important. But they just deserve more than the average straight A engineering student. You know what I'm saying?
Because it's a situation like yourself. I don't know if you know. I've worked with Travis with Bama Online in the photography and everything else. Contrary to popular belief, these players aren't compensated illegally like a lot of fans. Well, Bama's paying all these players, or Auburn's paying all these. It's not as rampant and as crazy because you get to know these players and you see them on another level. A lot of these guys, they're they're happy to be where they are. I think the new cafeteria situation, the eating taken care of, clothing taken care of, but they don't have the opportunity to go out and get a job because they have no time. But a lot of these guys aren't coming from a whole lot. I mean,
exactly.
I think that's the only way I can actually say it.
Yeah.
And I think they do need the extra because not all, but the majority of the average Bama students that's out there, a lot of them are coming from a situation to where their family can support them a lot better than what these other guys can. Most average Bama student is not the one that's getting a job. There's a lot of it work at the same time, but it's a limitation on how much a regular old athlete can actually work and do. So, yeah, he does need to be compensated a situation. That does have to be revisited. I'm glad it finally has been revisited after all these years. But, man, it's just a whole other can of worms are opening up here. I'm glad that we don't have to police this situation ourselves, but I think there has to be a governing body to control it all, pretty much.
I mean,
maybe separate from the NCAA.
See, that's when I think of that phrasing, I think, why doesn't the NCAA have a commissioner? Why doesn't the NCAA actually structure out all of what college football is? But I mean, they're scared to tackle this thing. Whatever high suite they're in right now, 12 to 20 suits are crying and saying, why didn't we handle this in January? Because now the government's coming after us, pressuring us, and we've got 8 days till July. Like, what do we do? Yeah. They're terrible.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And they've got no solutions.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, hey, it's in the world in general and the way it is, it's attacking the NCAA at the one part that they don't want to be attacked in, and that's financially.
Yeah.
It's been over the years, the college football we have today is not the college football that I grew up on in the 80s. It's more visual. There's, you can do anything and everything. You can follow a player as close as you want to follow him. So it has it's evolved, and it's not the same thing. I survived the 80s and majority of the 90s of Bama football. I'm glad to see it doing so well, and I enjoy it. Enjoy it while I can. But it's a whole other monster nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say this, and this is my opinion, but I think that the change, the evolution that is going into college football right now, it's going to be strange, and it's not going to seem great at first. But I think we've already kind of seen it with the transfer portal, where it's a little hectic at first, but we realize that it's not feeding the elite quite the same as we think it is, and it's also not taking away from them. So it's one of those situations where I think it can honestly balance itself out. Excuse me, as long as the NCAA handles the situation correctly, doesn't throw this thing at the feet of state and or federal governments and says, please fix this for us because we're totally inept and incompetent, Yeah.
Well, the transfer portal is a good thing. I mean, there's a lot of players out there, they're 18, 19-year-old kids making a lifelong decision. Myself, I started Mercedes-Benz 24 years ago, but I had the full opportunity to walk away if I wanted to. It's kind of hard to tie. I would hate to have thinking back in 1998 I'd have signed a piece of paper and Mercedes says, hey, you belong to us for the next 20 years.
Right.
So even though it's a large, weird grasp there, but, I think the transfer portal is a good thing. I don't think you need to let them jump around all the time, but, one time, whatever situation. But, again, it's a whole new can of worms and an evolution of college football and college sports in general.
Well, I look at it this way, and I got to go after this, but as far as it pertains to the transfer portal and you comparing it to the Mercedes-Benz, I went and played football at Faulkner in Montgomery and hated it. Nobody told me it was a bad idea. How many of these kids have 30 voices telling them what's good and what isn't, and they have to decide between those voices who to listen to or trust their own gut instinct, and they make a bad decision, and sometimes things just don't work out. They've got to correct it because that's what being a human being, is all about. You make mistakes, you learn from them, and you solve the problem. I tell my 5-year-old that, we've got to get to a point where we understand that 18-year-olds who play sports are a liability for those situations just as well. It's been a lot of fun, Dino.
Oh, yeah. All right, man. Have a great day.
You as well. We're going to wrap up Okay, well, we'll wrap up because me and Dinon went a little long there. But I'm saying I think that all of this can be a positive in the long run. We've just got to be patient. But a lot of the stuff that scares me is when the NCAA does not control what they have going on. This agent thing that Dinon put me toward, I hate that. Like that sickens me because there's outside of the influence of Nick Saban, who's stopping the biggest agent in the NFL from knocking on Will Anderson's door or chatting him up on his cell phone in 2 weeks' time and saying, "Hey, buddy, here's $1.5 million, or I'll stick to the actual example. Here's $500,000. I'll be your agent when you're ready to come into the NFL. You go ahead and hold on to this and enjoy it, and we'll talk again soon." Come on. You can't stop that. Other than the influence of Nick Saban, what stops that? Nothing. Don't forget, stick around on the Tide 100.9 app at 3 o'clock. Enter that code word that you'll hear. Earn yourself an opportunity to win a 20-quart Orca cooler filled to the brim with Pepsi and Buffalo Brock products, decked out in Alabama logos and gear. It's crimson and white. It's beautiful, and it's worth $250, and it could be yours. The Jay Barker Show is coming up next. I'll see you tomorrow for more of the Southern Fried Sports Variety right here on Tide 100.9.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
Drier air is moving into the area this afternoon. Skies will be steadily clearing with partly cloudy skies overnight tonight. 80 your daytime high this afternoon. 62 overnight tonight. Partly cloudy and warm for your Wednesday. Look for a daytime high in the middle 80s. I'm meteorologist Bill Murray on Tide 100.9.
It's 76 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
Thank you for listening.